Okay.
We're happy to welcome you tonight to our second night of our Winter Bible class. I feel compelled to say this. Our normal policy on weather is, if it's so bad when I leave here in the afternoon, I will call you and tell you we're not meeting. If I can get here and somebody comes, we'll meet, but use your own judgment. Don't get out on dangerous roads and take a chance. Usually if it looks like the parking lot's slick, I'll call. But if it's just wind or something like tonight, use your judgment. Don't get hurt. But I appreciate your interest. I appreciate your coming. We're looking at the priesthood in Exodus 29 and the related passages. And we were talking about a tie-in with the sin offering. And Monty had a question, and I put him off because we were at the cutting off point. So, sir, I will begin with you.
I can't remember the question.
Well, good. I will teach my class. We're down to number 5 on the presentation of the other ram as the ram of consecration. The Hebrew word milu, which means a fulfilling, it's in the plural, a setting of gems, technically, and here's the application here, consecration. And when it's used of something, it's usually a dedicatory sacrifice. Now that's 29, 19 through 25. You shall also take the other ram, and Aaron and his sons shall put their hands on the head of the ram. Then you shall kill the ram and take some of its blood, put it on the tip of the right ear of Aaron and on the tip of the right ear of his sons, on the thumb of their right hand and on the big toe of their right foot, and sprinkle the blood all around on the altar. And you shall take some of the blood that is on the altar and some of the anointing oil and sprinkle it on Aaron and on his garments, on his sons and on the garments of his sons with him. And he and his garments shall be hallowed, and his sons' garments with him. Also you shall take the fat of the ram, the fat tail, the fat that covers the entrails, the fatty lobe to the liver, the 2 kidneys, and the fat on them, the right thigh, for it is a ram of consecration, 1 loaf of bread, 1 cake with oil, and 1 wafer from the basket of the unleavened bread that is before Jehovah. And you shall put all these in the hands of Aaron and in the hands of his sons, and you shall wave them as a wave offering before Jehovah. You shall receive them back from their hands and burn them on the altar as a burnt offering, as a sweet aroma before Jehovah. It is an offering made by fire to Jehovah. Now we're paralleling Leviticus. And in Leviticus 8, Leviticus 8, beginning verse 22. All right, and you may have something over chapter 8, like Aaron and his sons consecrated. And he brought, verse 22, brought the ram, the second ram, the ram of consecration. Then Aaron and his sons laid their hands on the head of the ram, and Moses killed it. Also he took some of its blood, put it on the tip of Aaron's right ear, on the thumb of his right hand, on the big toe of his right foot. And then you keep reading down through verse 29, and what you're doing is paralleling what we just read. This is when it was done. Now Exodus says, here's what you do. Leviticus says, here he did it. So you deal with this ram of consecration. Look also at Leviticus chapter 7, verse 37. This is the law of the burnt offering, the grain offering, the sin offering, the trespass offering, the consecrations, and the sacrifice of the peace offering. So here you have consecration. Now, little a on your outline, consecration is explained in Leviticus 8:33. So let's look there. And you shall not go outside the door of the tabernacle of meeting for 7 days, until the days of your consecration are ended. For 7 days he shall consecrate you. So he's filling their hands, setting them apart for this work, installing them in the office. Look also to Ezekiel chapter 43. Ezekiel 43, verse 26. 7 days they shall make atonement for the altar and purify it, and so consecrate it. And you may have a marginal reading, literally, fill the hands, fill its hands. That's what the word literally means, to fill the hand. And filling the hand meant you were installing him in office. You were putting him in office. Look at Judges 17. Judges 17 deals with a Levite who is for sale because the people are not supporting the priesthood by bringing their offerings. But for our particular consideration, look at verse 5 of Judges 17. And the man Micah had a house of gods, and he made an ephod and teraphim, and you have consecrated. All right, you may have a marginal reading there, fill the hand of one of his sons who became his priest. So your marginal readings may help you see the meaning of the word, to fill the hand. Now, a little b, we get a little technical. I think this is about where we were. The Septuagint, and that's what?
70 scholars translating the Bible from Hebrew to Greek.
Okay. Let's say approximately 70. Approximately 70. That's why they call it the LXX, because they believe it was 70 scholars. But there are some who say yay and nay on there, so I wouldn't be dogmatic about it, but probably 70. And translating the Hebrew Old Testament into the Greek. So the Hebrew Bible, that's your Old Testament, translating it into Greek. See, this was done, does your note give you a date? This was done, and you check me on this, but approximately, I think about 280 BC. During the reign of Ptolemy Philadelphus. And it was done in Alexandria, Egypt. Now, and at 280, 260, 280 BC, the New Testament had not yet been revealed. So it was the Hebrew Old Testament, translated into Greek. And by the way, this Greek translation, the Septuagint, is the version that was used by Jesus and the apostles. Many of the quotations in what we call the New Testament are from the Septuagint. And that's why sometimes when you compare them to the Old Testament, words will be a little different, because you have a translation from Hebrew into Greek. That's free, I won't charge you for that. But the Septuagint has this Greek phrase, kreon teleosios. From teleosis, completion. Is the realm of completion, the realm of perfection. You've heard me say teleos, complete. A lot of times where the King James has the word perfect, it's the word teleos or a derivative of it, which means complete. The Hebrews writer, and I put this on slide so you can get it before you. The Hebrews writer used teleothes, being perfected of the Christ. So look at Hebrews 5. Speaking of Jesus' crucifixion. And having been, do you all have perfected? I have that? All right, that's this word, teleothes. Being perfected, he became the cause, the author of eternal salvation to all who obey him. So he, Jesus, was the perfected one. He became perfected through his obedience to the Father. Concerning Jesus' priesthood, the Hebrews writer called him a son perfected forevermore. And there you have weon, that's son, and teleo, to teleo, which is a participle of teleo, and it means he's the son perfected. The process, if you look at Hebrews 2 verse 10, there was a process that was going on that perfected Jesus. For it was fitting for him, you may have behooved him if you're reading King James. It was fitting for him, for whom are all things, and by whom all things, in bringing many sons to glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through suffering. So the process of the sufferings of Jesus perfected him. So the process was now complete. Imperfect and sinful as we are, demand a permanent high priest who is sinless and, here's your word, perfectly equipped by divine appointment and human experience to meet our needs, and with the perfect offering of himself as sacrifice. So if you write in your notes, what that is saying is that through his sufferings, Jesus became the perfected one who could be our sin offering, who could offer himself for our sins. He learned obedience by the things which he suffered, and having been made perfect, he became the cause of eternal salvation to all who obey him. Now go to Hebrews 2. That's the wrong reference. There are not. Well, yeah. That's the right reference.
2:10 is captain of salvation.
I'm sorry?
2:10 is captain of salvation.
2:17.
Okay.
First word.
Therefore.
All right, that's a conclusion, so that says you need to put together what's gone before it. Therefore, in all things, he had to be made like his brethren, that, in order that, he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. For in that he himself has suffered, being tested or tempted, he is able to aid, you may have succor, aid those who are tempted. So Jesus became the perfect one Now go to chapter 5.
Okay, that is where my question was.
Well,
To succor them,
sir,
to succor them. In verse 18. Succor.
succor,
Well,
aid,
explain.
help.
He's able to help us?
Yeah, able to help those who are tempted. Able to aid, the New King James Version. I'm sorry.
Comfort.
Able to comfort, King James.
No, I've got that written down, so
Okay, that's the Revised Version, 1881. To comfort or aid or help. Are you reading King James?
Yes.
All right, look at Romans 16. Beginning verse 1, Paul says, are you there? Monty, I'll get ahead of it, okay. You read it, Monty.
Verse 1 and 16.
1 and 2, please.
1 and 2. I commend you to Phoebe, our sister, which is a servant of the church, which is at
Sinclair.
Sinclair, that you receive her in the Lord as becoming saints, and ye assist her in whatsoever business she hath need of you, for she hath been a
Succorer.
of many, and myself also.
All right, the New King James there says helper. She's been a helper. So to succor someone is to help them. To assist, to aid. That help you?
Yes.
Okay, further?
Good.
Okay. I'm good with you being good. Always.
It's just the pronunciation of the word.
Uh,
It's the pronunciation of the word that,
okay, you got your phone with you?
yeah, that's not
Oh, that won't help us.
right.
You got yours?
But I'll listen to it.
Look it up, actually. Succor, is that way it's spelled in the King James?
Succor in this particular verse.
Succorer.
Succor.
But we're looking for the word succor, Succor.
But whenever I think of the term succor, I'm thinking of Sucker.
No, that's something you put in your mouth and eat.
Right, I get you.
She was not a sucker.
Yes.
That's also a fish you don't want to eat. Too many bones.
Yeah. You have to pressure cook those.
You got it?
yes.
All right, does yours give pronunciation?
S-U-H-A-R.
Sue Kerr. Succor, and it's probably a short U, so sucker.
It doesn't have anything on it.
Does it say it for you?
Yes.
All right, sucker. Can you hear that?
I heard it.
All right, sucker. Now, that's a helpful tool, especially, and I don't always agree with how they say things, because the American Standard marks it differently sometimes, but especially some of the hard names in the Bible, that too helps when they pronounce it for you. That'll get you close enough that when you're reading it, you don't get to it and go, vuh, 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 vuh. Or some people do, just skip it.
Well, when somebody hears you say sucker, you know, and you'll get some laughs.
I would almost think that you're the only one in this part of the universe that would think of a candy on a stick.
Well, you just,
But I can understand why you're there. A sucker can also be someone who's gullible. Just saying. Okay, you with us? Monty, does that help?
Yes.
An aider, an sister,
That's what was the question last
a
week.
helper. Okay. Well, I'm glad we brought it to mind. All right, Hebrews 5. That's what I'm telling you. There are no silly questions. If you don't know, that's why we're here.
I just want a clarification on it. I said, I just want a clarification on it.
Yeah, but what I'm saying to all of us is, if you have a question on something like that, don't be bashful to ask it, because you probably are not the only one doesn't know. You're just the only one brave enough to say you don't know. Some people are afraid folks know they're ignorant. But they're ignorant. Everybody in this room is ignorant of something. If we weren't, we'd be God. We'd know everything. So we're all ignorant of something.
I will say the strong concordance for the mobile, for the phone, is a good tool because it'll like tell you the Hebrew or the Greek, I'm sorry, and then it'll also tell you like the definition of that word. So it's handy if you can get that on your phone.
Strong's out. If you have eSword, you have Strong's. I don't know what Olive Tree does. That's the Apple deal.
It is eSword bot.
Light. Okay, that means it has some eSword features. But if you have your eSword, and I think you can buy eSword for Apple products for like 99 cents or something like that, it'll give you Strong's definition. And you can also put Thayer on there, and it'll help you with the Greek. You can put Brown Driver and Briggs, and that'll help you with the Hebrew. It comes across BDB on your eSword when it's listed, Brown Driver and Briggs. That's the Hebrew lexicon that's generally considered the source. And Thayer is the Greek lexicon.
Can you spell that?
Thayer is considered the source, one of the leading sources of Greek definition. And it gives it to you in English, so that helps you. You don't have to know Greek and Hebrew to know what the word is and what it means, and how it's used, how it can be used. Be careful though, because there are sometimes several meanings to one word, and context has to help you figure out what's the best word to use in translating it there in the English. But you're right, that's a great, great tool. All right, chapter 5 of Hebrews. Now we're talking about the high priest. You should have, or something over 4:14 says something like our compassionate high priest, or something like that. And then over chapter 5, this one says qualifications for high priesthood. The word "for" tells you you're just connecting with what you just read. So you don't click. For every high priest taken from among men, that's from the tribe of Levi, is appointed for men and things pertaining to God. The priest helps you go to God, in order that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins. He can have compassion, he can sympathize. I'm sorry?
Just trying to find where you're at.
Hebrews 5:1. The margin of this one says he can deal gently with. He can have compassion on those who are ignorant and going astray, since or because he himself is also subject to weakness. So the high priest under the Levitical law were not sinless. That's why they had to offer a sacrifice for themselves, especially on the Day of Atonement. Leviticus 16, Aaron went into the Holy of Holies and offered for the priests. And then he came out and went back and offered for the people. So this says the earthly priests under the Mosaic dispensation were humans. That's going to contrast with Jesus. Because of this, he is required, as for the people, so also for himself, to offer sacrifices for sin. And you may have a reference there to Leviticus chapter 9, verse 7, and Leviticus 16:6. And Leviticus 16 reference is the Day of Atonement. So Aaron would offer for the priests before he offered for the people. If I'm going too quickly, stop me. And no man takes this honor to himself, but he who is called by God, just as Aaron was. You can't just pop up under the Mosaic law and say, hey, I want to be a high priest, or I want to be a priest. You couldn't just take that honor. It had to come through Aaron. It had to come through the tribe of Levi, through Aaron, whom God called. So that means they had to be an authorized person. So also Christ did not glorify himself to become high priest. But it was he who said to him, God said to him, you are my son, today I have begotten you. And you probably have a reference there to Psalms 2 verse 7. As he also says in another place, and you probably have a reference there to Psalms 110 verse 1. You are a priest forever after the order, that word means arrangement, of Melchizedek. Now he's talking about Jesus, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplication with vehement cries and tears, he shed tears, to him who was able to save. Now notice that. He is offering up these prayers to him who is able to save him out of death, literally, from, out of, and was heard because of his godly fear. Though he was a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. Now I want to go back, and this is not part of our study, but I want to say that on verse 7. Jesus prayed with vehement cries and tears to him who was able to save him out of death. What was his prayer? Y'all know that.
I would say his will. His will.
Thy will be done.
That's the latter part of it. For what was he asking? I'm sorry.
Take this cup from me.
All right, if it's possible, let this cup of death, this cross, be removed. That was his request, wasn't it? Wasn't it?
Yes.
All right, what did God say to that request?
No.
And Jesus said, your will be done, not mine. Here's what I want you to get. He called on him who can save him from death and was what?
Heard.
When God says no, it doesn't mean he didn't hear your prayer. We've had too many people, I've heard too many Christians say, why didn't God hear my prayer? What they mean is, why didn't God do what I asked him to do? He heard. But if we don't pray according to his will, we're telling him what to do, not asking him if he can do it. Some things are not according to his will, and in some things, he knows better than we do. In all things, he knows better than we do. But sometimes when he says no, it's because he knows that won't help us. That's not good for us. That makes sense to you? So if somebody ever says, why didn't God hear my prayer? Take them to Hebrews 5:7. He said no to Jesus, but he heard the prayer. Though he was a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered, and having been perfected, he became the cause, author of eternal salvation to all who obey him, called by God as high priest. So Jesus didn't volunteer to be a high priest. That was a part of his mission from God, according to the arrangement or order of Melchizedek, of whom we have much to say and hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. See, he's writing these folks who had obeyed the gospel, who are being persecuted, who are trying to go back to Judaism to avoid the persecuting, and he said, your attempt to go back to Judaism has made you dull of hearing, hard of hearing my will. So here we have a perfected high priest who didn't have to offer the ram of consecration. the realm of perfection. He offered himself, who is perfection. You understand that? Questions or comments? All right, Hebrews 7:28, we saw, says Jesus was appointed high priest as a son perfected forevermore. So you see the perfection of Jesus. Now, one of the themes of Hebrews is a better priesthood. The word better gives you the idea of what's contrasted in Hebrews. You have the law of Moses, and we have a better. We have a better law, we have a better lawgiver, we have a better sacrifice. And that's what Hebrews is showing, so these people will understand. If you go back to Judaism, you're going to have something inferior. You're not going to get something that can help. All right, another writer said, by the offering of himself, Jesus perfected forever them that are set apart, sanctified. He puts them by his one offering into the possession of all the privileges of fully pardoned and justified ones. If you obey the gospel, apply the blood of Jesus to your soul, you are fully pardoned and made just, made righteous. That's what the blood does. And if you keep on walking in the light, when you sin and ask God to forgive you, it keeps you that way. That makes sense to you? Now that is an absolute comfort that will help you to have confidence in living the Christian life. Are you going to sin? Yes. Are you going to do it on purpose? No. If you do sin but not on purpose, what are you going to do? Repent, ask God to forgive you. What's God going to do? Forgive you. What does God see then? He sees the blood of Christ covering you. It keeps you perfected and justified. Hebrews 12:23, the spirits of just men made perfect, bears the same reference. They are entered into possession of, or fully installed in, what was intended for them. So that's the Christian. Now when these folks in the Hebrews, to whom the Hebrews writer wrote, try to go back to Judaism, look what they're giving them. And some of our members leave the Lord and go back to denominationalism. Look at what they're giving them. My contention is, a lot of our members don't know what they have. A lot of folks who are called Christians don't understand what Christianity is. They don't understand what they have. They think it's sitting in a church house, going through religious forms. They're almost like the Pharisees. As long as I get this service done. How many times, or have you ever dealt with someone who said, well, I worshiped this morning, so I don't need to worship tonight. I don't need to be there Wednesday night or anytime something's going on we study the Bible. What are they missing? They're missing what Christianity is all about. But I worshiped this morning. Now, I don't know if y'all ever experienced this or not, but when I was growing up in South Georgia, sometimes congregations would serve the Lord's Supper toward the first of the service. Kind of like we do. Ours is more in the middle, but we had people, when they ate the cracker and drank the fruit of the vine, get up and leave. They'd done worship. The rest of the worship wasn't important. When I lived in Talladega, Alabama, we had a couple come through that were coming by, and they stopped in our parking lot just before we started. One of our elders was coming into the building, and they stopped him and they said, would you serve us the Lord's Supper in the car? We're on vacation and we're just trying to get on our way, but we were not able to worship this day. And he explained to them, it's not drive-in community. As long as I eat a cracker and drink grape juice, I'm all right. I've known people who would go fishing, miss the services, and take a cracker and grape juice and somehow convince themselves they were all right. I've dealt with that kind of stuff. That's where your Hebrews folks were. They didn't understand what they had. So it wasn't anything to them to give it up, to lose it, because it didn't mean anything to them. You need to come in your growth as a Christian to appreciate what being a Christian means, what that relationship with God is all about. When you grasp that, the devil and all he has can't pull it away from you. You'll fight to the end. That's free. All right, this offering, little c, this offering was applied primarily to the ceremony of consecrating the priests, as described in chapter 8, verse 25, and was restricted to the idea of investiture with the priesthood. And I give you the references. This gave rise to the expression, to fill the hand for Jehovah. That is, to provide something to offer to Jehovah. Look at 1 Chronicles 29. Here you're given, and you may have over chapter 29, offerings for building the temple. So these people are bringing their offerings. And in verse 5, you have the gold for things of gold, the silver for things of silver, and for all kinds of work to be done by the hands of craftsmen. Who then is willing to, do you have consecrate? You may have a marginal reading, fill his hand to Jehovah. That's the meaning of this idea. Having something to offer to Jehovah, to fill Jehovah's hands. Hence, milu denotes the filling of the hand with sacrificial gifts to be offered to Jehovah, and is used primarily of the particular sacrifice through which the priests were symbolically invested at their consecration with the gifts they were to offer, and were empowered by virtue of this investiture to officiate at the sacrifices. And secondly, in a less restricted sense, of priestly consecration generally. In chapter 8, verse 33, the days of your consecration. You're going to be consecrated as a priest. That's Leviticus 8, I believe, 33. All right, so when they come, any questions on that and so forth? Now this is new ground. I understand that. But just get the idea. The rams were to set the priest apart, cover their sins, and put them into the priesthood. Now, when Aaron and his sons came, they were to lay their hands upon the head of the ram. In this way, they identify with the ram. And the ram, in a sense, becomes them. They're one with this ram that's going to be offered for them. So when the ram is offered, they're offering themselves. Moses is to kill the ram, take of his blood, put some of the blood, now notice these specifics here, upon the tip of the right ear of Aaron and his sons, upon the thumb of their right hand, and upon the great toe of their right foot. Now, quit calling your great toe a big toe. You have a Bible for calling it the great toe, which makes the contrast with the pinky really nice. Notice right, not left. Not left ear, not left thumb, not left great toe. Right. Why? Me either. Except God said.
Right.
That's it. He didn't explain it. See, God doesn't owe us an explanation for everything. He just said do it. if you're going to consecrate these priests, you put it on the right. Now question, could Moses have obeyed God if he put it on the left? No. Well, what if he put it on the left ear, but on the right thumb and the right great toe? All right, those are three things. If you put it on the left ear, the right thumb, and the right great toe, in how many things had he obeyed God? Why? He did what he wanted to do on the left ear. The only reason he put it on the right thumb and the right great toe was he agreed with God. If he'd have thought it ought to have been somewhere else, he'd put it there too. You got it? That's an important point when you're studying with somebody. Then take the rest of the blood, sprinkle it upon the altar round about. Now, one writer made an interesting observation, I think. He said the high priest was to have ears attentive to God's word, hands that were used in God's work, and feet that went about representing Jehovah to the people. I like that. Now, that's not why the Bible says it was put on there, but that's true of all of us, isn't it? That's what priests do. Now, this means the high priest was to be in total submission to God. God controlled all of him, from the ear to the foot, from the head to the toe, we might say. Total submission and service to God. We're priests. So God ought to control us. Questions or comments? All right, little F. Moses is to take of the blood upon the altar of the anointing oil and sprinkle. It means to spurt this blood. This is a different word from that used in verse 16. He is to do it upon Aaron and upon his garments and upon his sons and their garments, and this will hallow them, notice it, and their garments. The priest's garments were also to be considered holy, set apart. Look to Hebrews chapter 9. Do you see how important it is when you study Exodus to study Hebrews? To see the type. Hebrews 9:22. And according to the law, almost all things are, do you have, purified? Anybody have that? Purified? Almost all things are purified. You may have a margin reading that says cleansed.
Are you on?
Mine's is purged.
Hebrews 9:22.
It says purge.
Purged. All things are purified. Purged. To purge gets out sin, which makes you pure. If you purge your system, you're getting out the uncleanness to purify. Almost all things are purified or purged with blood, and without shedding of blood, there is no remission. Importance of blood. Years ago, a Methodist, I don't know what they do now, took every song out of their songbooks that had to do with blood. It said blood is repulsive. Sing about, talk about blood is repulsive. I'm not up on what they're doing now, but that was years ago. They did that. They missed the whole Bible. All right, little G, Moses is to take the fat tail. Fat tail, one writer said, provides reserve strength for the sheep, much like the hump does on the camel. When the sheep is butchered, this fatty tail is quite valuable. So he's taken that and all the fat that was upon the inwards, and the caul of the liver, and the 2 kidneys, and their fat, and the right thigh. He's also to take 1 loaf of bread, 1 cake, so you have a loaf and a cake of oil bread, and then you have a smaller bread, a wafer, out of the basket of unleavened bread that was before Jehovah. And Moses is to place the whole of all of this upon the hands of Aaron, upon the hands of his sons, and wave them for a wave offering. Now, let's think about this wave offering a minute. Yes?
I've been looking for gall.
Caul.
They spelled it caul here, and some other places it's spelled G-A-L-L, gall. But that's the thing that takes the impurities out of your bloodstream, right?
In the King James, it's gall, G-A-L-L.
I couldn't find it in the dictionary, in the Webster and King James, the Bible. Not spelled that way. But I understand what it's for, and I lost mine.
You don't have a gall for anything.
Gallbladder goes with it, and gallbladder.
The caul is the membranous bag which encloses the heart of us, called the pericardium. But that's not what is involved here, so let me see. G-A-L-L, King James.
G-A-L-L.
Yeah. The bile secreted in the liver. The Hebrew word mererah means bitterness.
It still functions some, it said in the dictionary where I looked it up, that once it's removed, it still has a drip going into the liver. It helps to purify.
Okay? So you're taking all of that and you're making it as a wave offering. Now, the wave offering, the movement indicated by waving was a horizontal motion. May have been forward and back again like the motion of sawing, as if extending the offering towards the altar. Look at Isaiah 10. Verse 15. Shall the axe boast itself against him who chops with it, or shall the saw exalt itself against him who saws with it? As if a rod could wield itself against those who lift it up, or as if a staff could lift up, as if it were not wood. So to wave, to refer to the motion of sawing. Also, the waving motion may have been a right to left motion, side to side, like the motions used in cutting with a sickle. Noof, which is the verb form, expresses this type of motion in Deuteronomy 23:25. So we'll look at that. Like cutting with a sickle. Deuteronomy 23:25. When you come into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the heads with your hand, but you shall not use a sickle on your neighbor's standing grain. So you're not to make the motion of the sickle, and that's the wave offering. So waving it before Jehovah. Everybody with me on that? The wave offering. right? Moses is then, once he does that, to take the offering from their hands and burn them all on the altar upon the burnt offering for a sweet, and here we have that word savor or aroma, sweet aroma before Jehovah. See the smoke's going up, here's your picture, smoke's going up, and God smells the aroma. That's the picture. But Chip, we're using what kind of language here?
Perfect. Yes,
And for more.
that's what I said.
I'm getting older, I'll have to come pull the head off this thing for you.
You didn't hear me? I can't hear you.
Anthro.
What's that?
Anthro.
Anthro. Everybody, you can say that?
And throw.
There you go.
And throw.
Oh.
Po. That's when you ain't got no money. You po. That's Bill Anderson's band, the Po Folks. All right, put them together. Anthropo. Morphic. Put them together. Anthropomorphic. Can you do that?
I just don't use it every day, that's the problem. Anthropomorphic.
Now, your assignment for the next 30 days is to say it one time at least every day.
Okay.
And you'll remember it if you'll find a way to use it in a sentence.
James, make me do this. Okay.
There are some people I can help, and then there are those. That's how you say it. Anthropomorphic. Anthropomorphic. Now, what anthropos is man. It's a great word for which you get our word man. Anthropos. Man's characteristics attributed to a non-human, God's Spirit. So he doesn't literally have a nose to smell the sweet-smelling savor. So that's the picture. It's put in language that we can picture so we can understand it, so we can understand God and how he works. Now, have fun with this, and I don't care if you use it or not, but it will help you learn it if you really want to learn it. But this is what he does. So you have the sweet-smelling aroma or savor before Jehovah is an offering made by fire. You'll see that terminology. Offering made by fire. Now there's the altar. You've got the altar burnt offering, and where is it located? Can you picture the tabernacle in your mind? Where is it located?
Courtyard?
In the court of the tabernacle. Before you ever go into the sanctuary, the tent, it's out the courtyard. And you're burning these offerings. You can imagine for the nation how many burnt offerings they offered every day. But we cannot fathom the blood that was shed and the animals that were offered. So God continually blessed them with an abundance to be able to offer as he told them to. One writer said, "It is this contact with the holy flesh and its reception on the altar from their hands which gives the priest their peculiar standing." So they put their hands on the ram, then the ram's killed, these pieces are put in their hands, and they wave them as an offering before Jehovah, and then Aaron takes them to the altar burnt offering, and they're burned on the sin offering, so you have the sweet smell of the sin offering and the wave offering going up God. That's the picture. Questions or comments? All right, then Moses, we come to deal with the portions for Moses, Aaron, and Aaron's sons. So each of them is to have some of this offering for themselves. And we'll take 10 here, and we'll start this when we come back. Okay. Number 6, we begin to deal with the portions for Moses, Aaron, and Aaron's sons. Now remember I said the priests were supported by the offerings. So now we're going to see some of that. Exodus 29, 26 through 28. Then you shall take the breast of the ram of Aaron's consecration, and wave it as a wave offering before Jehovah, and it shall be, notice this, your portion. Do any of you have your lot? Everybody have your portion?
No, I have
That
that part.
Your part, okay. And from the ram of the consecration, you shall consecrate the breast of the wave offering, which is waved, and the thigh of the heave offering raised, of that which is for Aaron, and of that which is for his sons. It shall be from the children of Israel. Now notice this first. These offerings. It shall be from the children of Israel for Aaron and his sons by a statute alone forever. And how would you define forever there? This portion is Aaron's and his sons forever.
Long serves as the high priest. And we're here in the priesthood, long until the priesthood ends.
That's more of like until the law is terminated. So this takes you to Pentecost, until Pentecost. For it is a heave offering, it shall be a heave offering from the children of Israel, from the sacrifices of their peace offerings. That is, their heave offering to Jehovah. Now you go to Leviticus 7, and you see this being carried out. Leviticus 7:31. And the priest shall burn the fat on the altar, but the breast shall be Aaron's and his sons. Also the right thigh you shall give to the priest as a heave offering from the sacrifices of your peace offerings. He among the sons of Aaron who offers the blood of the peace offering and the fat shall have the right thigh for his part. For the breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the heave offering I've taken from the children of Israel, from the sacrifices of their peace offerings. And I've given them to Aaron the priest, and to his sons from the children of Israel by a statute forever. So they are to support the priest. Now when the people quit bringing their offerings, priests are not supported. Priests are. Right, little B under 6, Moses is to sanctify, kadosh, set apart the breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the heave offering of the ram of consecration as the portion for Aaron and his sons forever from the children of Israel. Right now we talked about the wave offering, but what is the heave offering? This writer said heaving was a single movement, an uplifting of the thing heaved. Waving was a repeated movement, a swaying of the thing waved backwards and forwards horizontally. Both 4 modes of presenting the thing to God. So it was a heave offering, lifting it up. Waving it, that's a wave offering. Lifting it up, heave offering. 2 different kinds. Single move. So God has made these 4 available to the priest. So this installation offering, except the taking of these portions, resembles basically the peace offering. And we will, Lord willing, look at the peace offering in detail when we get to Leviticus. I will give you the text in case you're not with us. The peace offering is found in Leviticus chapter 3 and chapter 7, verses 11 through 36. Leviticus chapter 3 and chapter 7, verses 11 to 36. That's your information on the peace offering. All right, let's think about these portions from Israel. Turn to Leviticus 10. Verses 14 and 15. The breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the heave offering you shall eat in a clean place, you, your sons, and your daughters with you, for they are your due, and your sons' due, which are given from the sacrifices of peace offerings of the children of Israel. The thigh of the heave offering and the breast of the wave offering, they shall bring with the offerings of fat made by fire, to offer as a wave offering before Jehovah. And it shall be yours and your sons with you, by statute forever, as Jehovah has commanded. So as long as the law was in effect and the people were faithful, the priest had meat to eat. And they were continually supplied with. Now look at Numbers 18. Numbers 18, verse 11 first. And you may have over chapter 11, chapter 18, verse 8, offerings for support of the priest, something like that. Verse 11, this also is yours, the heave offering of their gift, with all the wave offerings of the children of Israel. I have given them to you and your sons and daughters with you as an ordinance forever. Everyone who is clean in your house may eat it. So there had to be a qualification. They had to be purified in the house. Now drop down to verse 18. And their flesh shall be yours, just as the wave breast and the right thigh are yours. All the heave offerings of the holy things, which the children of Israel offer to Jehovah, I have given to you and your sons and daughters with you as an ordinance forever. It is, now notice it, a covenant of salt forever before Jehovah with you and your descendants with you. A covenant of salt was something to be kept. So you see, when Israel became unfaithful, what all they were doing. Look at Deuteronomy 18. Deuteronomy 18, verse 3. And this shall be the priest's due, and they have portion, from the people, from those who offer a sacrifice, whether it's a bull or sheep, they shall give to the priest the shoulder, the cheeks, and the stomach. So the shoulder which was heaved was given to the officiating priest. The breast which was waved for the priest in general and their families. Now, this lasts as long as the law lasts. And one writer said, probably the great number of peace offerings which were offered furnished them with their chief supply of animal food. So you see they're dependent on it. Now, there are two principles, or at least two passages that teach the same principle in the New Testament. Look at Luke 10. When Jesus sent the 70 out, begin in verse 1. After these things, the Lord appointed 70 others also, and sent them 2 by 2 before his face into every city and place where he himself was about to go. Then he said to them, the harvest truly is great, but the laborers few. Therefore pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Go your way. Behold, I send you out as lambs among wolves. Carry neither money or money bag, knapsack, or sandals, and greet no one along the road. Greeting here would be to ask provisions. Circle it, but whatever house you enter, first say peace to this house. And if a son of peace is there, your peace will rest on it. If not, it will return to you. Having the son of peace there would mean that house would support them. And remain in the same house, eating and drinking such things as they give. And here's your principle. For the laborer is worthy of his wages. Do not go from house to house. Don't go from house to house asking for sustenance, for provision. You go to one house, if there's there one who is faithful to God, they'll take care of it. Now, here is the first century idea of hospitality. They didn't have motels and restaurants. So you moved among the people, and the people took care of it. Now that's the way I grew up as a boy in the church. Where I lived, we had 2 motels in town, and I guess maybe 1 or 2 restaurants. But when the preacher came to preach in a meeting, he stayed with some of us. And we provided. And I know my daddy on many occasions would look at the preacher and the car and whatever, and if it needed tires, he'd put 4 tires on it before he left. The preacher needed clothes, he'd take him down to buy him clothes. We took care of it. And that's your principle here. The one who works is worthy of being supported among those with whom he's working. Now you have that same idea in Galatians chapter 6. And verse 6. Let him who is taught the word, now you may have the word communicate, share in all good things with him who teaches. So, if he's teaching you the spiritual things, you take care of him physically. Now that principle comes from the offerings of the people supporting the priests. Questions or comments? Now that takes care of the consecration offerings. We move now in verses 29 and 30 to the putting on of the holy garments. now they're going to be clothed with these holy garments. Verse 29, and the holy garments of Aaron shall be his sons after him. So that tells you the high priesthood will move through the descendants of Aaron, to be anointed in them and to be consecrated in them. That son who becomes priest in his place, that means when Aaron dies and Eleazar becomes priest, he shall put on these clothes for 7 days when he enters the tabernacle of meeting to minister in the holy place. So he is to put on these clothes. Now, you may have a marginal reading for holy sanctuary. The tabernacle, the tent part of the tabernacle arrangement, was considered holy. It was made up of how many compartments?
Outside the court, the holy.
Okay, we're talking about the tent itself now.
Okay, so two.
Two. And the first one was known as what?
The holy place.
Holy place. And the second? Holy of holies, or most holy place. Notice that, holy. Now that's the sanctuary. With me? Everybody with me? Our auditorium is not a sanctuary. That's what denominational people call it. It's not holy. You can do anything in this church house that God authorizes. There are no holy compartments of it. So I've heard people, parents say to their children, you're misbehaving in the church house. Except they generally say the church. And what do they say? This is a more holy place than somewhere else. So we need to do better with our terminology. It's wrong to lie. It's wrong to lie at home, just as much so in the church house. This is not a sacred place. And so these garments, they are kodesh, they are holy. Go to Aaron, go to his sons after him. Look at Numbers 20. You see they have this food, now they have these particular garments. Numbers 20, beginning verse 22, you have probably over 22, something like the death of Aaron. Now the children of Israel, the whole congregation, journeyed from Kadesh and came to Mount Hor. And Jehovah spoke to Moses and Aaron in Mount Hor by the border of the land of Edom, saying, Aaron shall be, you have gathered to his people. Now you may have a marginal reading, Aaron shall die. So gathered to his people is a easier way, maybe a more compatible or palatable way of saying died to somebody. It's a euphemism. You all know what a euphemism is? It's what's considered a tame word used in the place of one that is harsh or strong. Now all euphemisms are not wrong, but some of them are because they reference the name of God or they reference some other things. For example, the word G-O-S-H references the name of God. It's a euphemism for God. When somebody says that, they're saying God. Or G-O-L-L-Y references the name of God. The word H-E-C-K is the word for hell. It references hell. So when they're saying that word, they're saying hell. Now, dictionaries don't define words. They tell us how they're used. in conversation. So you would do well to look up the words you use and see how people who are hearing them, if they know what those words stand for, know what you're saying. Well, other euphemisms are not sinful. Gathered to his people. What's our word for someone died? What do we say? Someone died.
Passed away.
Passed away. What do doctors say to a family when someone dies on the operating table, for example?
We lost them.
We lost him. Or we were not able to save him. Those are euphemisms. Now, I will tell you this. For a number of years in law enforcement, I delivered death notifications to families. Somebody died, and it was my job to go tell the family. If you're ever in the business of telling someone a loved one died, use the word died.
Yes.
Because they can begin to process that. If you hit someone with, we lost him, the first thought is, we'll go find him. Where is he? Not, he's dead. So I would tell people, I'm very sorry to have to inform you that your son died, or your son is dead. Now they're going to fall apart, but they begin to process what really happened. They're not having to define terms. You with me? So, gathered to his people, pass away, that kind of thing are euphemisms, a more mild way of saying something that's considered more harsh. He gathered to his people, for he shall not enter the land which I have given to the children of Israel, because you rebelled against my word at the water of Meribah. Take Aaron and Eleazar his son, and bring them up to Mount Hor, and strip Aaron of his garments. So see these garments we're reading about. And put them on Eleazar his son, for Aaron shall be gathered to his people and die there. All right, now Eleazar is going to become the high priest. So you take these garments, and that's what we're reading here. Take these garments and put them on Eleazar. So Moses did just as Jehovah commanded. They went up to Mount Hor in the sight of all the congregation. Moses stripped Aaron of his garments and put them on Eleazar his son. And Aaron died there on the top of the mountain. Then Moses and Eleazar came down from the mountain. Now when all the congregation saw that Aaron was dead, all the house of Israel mourned for Aaron 30 days. So you change your high priest. You changed the high priest. Does that mean the law changes? Why not? I thought Hebrews 7:12 said with the change of the priesthood comes change of the law.
It's still underneath the old law.
Sir?
Said it's still underneath the old law?
All right, what about the priesthood?
It's still the Levitical priesthood.
All right, it's still the Levitical priesthood. It's still the Aaronic priesthood, because Eleazar is Aaron's son. See? Everybody with me on that? So we're not changing law, we're just changing the high priest. Priesthood stays the same, still Aaronic, from Aaron. All right, so here you strip the garments, put them on the next high priest. That was to be done on down through as long as the law lasted. And he's to wear them 7 days. Once he puts them on, when he comes into the holy place of the tent of meeting to minister to Jehovah. Why not when he comes into the most holy place? Why just the holy place?
Well, he's only able to go in there twice a year.
All right, it's not the Day of Atonement. He's going to officiate every day. But But every day he can't go into the most holy place. That's only on the Day of Atonement. But every day he can go into the holy place to minister. Very good. All right, so we have the garments. Any questions or comments on the garments? All right, in 31 to 34, then they partake of the ram of consecration. And you shall take the ram of the consecration and boil its flesh in the holy place. Then Aaron and his son shall eat the flesh of the ram and the bread that is in the basket by the door of the tabernacle of meeting. They shall eat those things with which the atonement, all of you have atonement here, was made, consecrate and to sanctify them, circle it, but an outsider shall not eat them because they are holy. And if any of the flesh of the consecration offerings or of the bread remains until the morning, then you shall burn the remainder with fire. It shall not be eaten. Notice the reason. Because it is holy. Right? Leviticus 8:31 tells us that Moses is to take the flesh of the ram of consecration and boil it in a holy place. Look at Leviticus 8:31. And Moses said to Aaron and his sons, boil the flesh at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Now hold your finger there and go back to Exodus 29, verse 31. You shall take the ram of the consecration and boil its flesh in, you have the holy place. All right? Now, Leviticus 8:31. Moses said to Aaron and his sons, boil the flesh at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. So what is the holy place of Exodus 29:31?
The door of the tabernacle.
Absolutely. So, you see, if you don't understand, it's a holy place as distinguished from the holy place, you get the idea that they ate in the first compartment of the tabernacle. But that's not the case. They're out in the court by the door of the tabernacle. So that's the holy place where they are to boil and eat this sacrifice. Now they do that at the door. Are you with me? Do you see this? That's how you use the whole teaching to understand what's said somewhere. All right, turn to Matthew chapter 12. Verse 4. Well, let's begin at verse 3. Well, to get the main thought, let's go down. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. Now, I'm telling you this because you may not be here when I cover Matthew 12. The key point of contention here in these first 8 verses is that he did it on the Sabbath day, not that he didn't. And his disciples were hungry, began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. And when the Pharisees saw, they said to him, look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath. They would call that work. Circle it. But he said to them, have you not read what David did when he was hungry? He and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests. Now, was Jesus saying David was justified in eating the showbread? No. He was saying, you believe David is your hero, and you don't blame him for anything. Why don't you blame David if you're going to blame me? Because David ate bread that only the priest could eat. They were hungry, but that did not justify their eating that bread. And then Jesus goes on to say, verse 8, for the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. What he went on to say was that we did not work on the Sabbath day. We were not making bread. We were eating husks, eating the grain after the husks were taken away. But the idea was, notice for our consideration, verse 4, that David ate the showbread. That was only for the priests. So here you have these provisions for the priests. Priests are to eat those things wherewith atonement was made to consecrate and sanctify them. Let's go to Leviticus 10. I think we need to stress this. Atonement was made. Leviticus 10:14. The breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the heave offering you shall eat in a clean place. You, your sons, and your daughters with you, for they are your due, and your sons' due, which are given from the sacrifices and peace offerings of the children of Israel. Drop down to verse 15. The thigh of the heave offering and the breast of the wave offering they shall bring with the offerings of fat made by fire, to offer as a wave offering before Jehovah. And it shall be yours and your sons with you by statute forever, as Jehovah has commanded. Verse 17. Why have you not eaten the sin offering in a holy place, since it is most holy, and God has given it to you to bear the guilt of the congregation, to make atonement for them before Jehovah? So we're going to find out the priests didn't do what they were supposed to be doing about eating these matters, and Moses is going to get on them, basically. Atonement. Atonement is made, all right? Let's look at that word, covering. And it's used here with respect to a peace offering. Now here, the idea of removing guilt is not included. It's the idea of covering what God has given. You're to make atonement, an atoning force. Pervaded all sacrifice. Sin offerings were wholly expiatory. Burnt offerings and peace offerings partially so. So every time you see the word atonement, covering, it does not always mean removing the guilt of sin. These are to be used to make atonement, the text says. But it does not here refer to removing sin. Now, I want to especially stress the stranger, the one who is not qualified, is not to eat these offerings. So, this is made clear. They are to eat these things. Aaron and his sons shall eat them. But in verse 33 of Exodus 29, the latter part, but, now the New King James says, an outsider. Anybody have a different reading?
Stranger, not eat.
The stranger shall not eat them because they're holy. The stranger is a foreigner, one not here, not one of Aaron's sons or Aaron. Here is one who is not a priest. He's called a stranger, or he is called an outsider, outside the Aaronic line. Everybody with me there? This is not the ger, the sojourner among them. But this is one who is not a descendant of Aaron or Aaron. Are you with me on that? Now, Leviticus 22:10 will add something else. Leviticus 22:10. No outsider, do you have stranger there? No stranger, no outsider shall eat the holy offering. One who dwells with the priest, now that'd be a visitor, somebody's visiting the priest and dwelling with them, or a hired servant shall not eat the holy thing. Alright, so if you're visiting Aaron as his house guest, when they eat the holy things, you can't go with them. So here's a restriction. Just because you're the guest of the priest, or you're his hired servant. You're in his household, but you can't eat these holy things. You're not a descendant of Aaron. Now look at verse 11 of Leviticus 22. But if the priest buys a person with his money, he may eat it. And one who is born in his house may eat his food. So if a priest purchased a servant, he becomes part of the house. He becomes part of the family. Adopted in, as it were. He can eat it, and the children can eat it. One born in the house of the priest. Verse 12, if the priest's daughter is married to an outsider, she may not eat of the holy offering. So a marriage can affect her ability to be supported by the holy things. And the indication is she's married outside, and the husband is responsible for supporting her. And she doesn't live off the offerings anymore. Verse 13, but if the priest's daughter is a widow or divorced and has no job and has returned to her father's house as in her youth, she may eat her father's food, but no outsider shall eat it. So she's come back home, the priest is supporting her again, as though she was before she ever left home. So she can eat of it. So here are the people who can and cannot eat these holy food. Restrictions. Now, if Aaron has a touch of sympathy with his guest and says, well, now you just come on, you can eat anyway, would he be pleasing to God? No. So when God gives a restriction, he means it. And to violate that is to sin. Questions or comments? All right, look also at Leviticus 7. And let's look at what you're to do with what's left over. Leviticus 7, verse 18. And if any of the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering is eaten at all on the third day, it shall not be accepted, nor shall it be imputed to him. It shall be an abomination to him who offers it, and the person who eats of it shall bear his, do you have guilt or iniquity there? Iniquity. All right? Do not eat on something that's left the third day. Then Leviticus 8:32, what remains of the flesh and of the bread you shall burn with fire. So when this is left over, you burn it. Now why? Why couldn't you eat leftovers?
Could be spoiled, rotten. They commanded it.
Because these things are holy. And God said, here's how they're to be used. And here's how they're not to be used. And you don't have the right to change it. So you put on your holy garments, and then you're supported by these offerings, and here's where you can eat. Yes, sir.
I might have missed it, but is this daily or?
Some of the offerings are brought daily. You have your morning and evening sacrifice that is brought. All along you would have free will offerings that are being brought. So there were a lot of offerings being brought every day to the tabernacle and the temple. And since you raised that question, I'll make this point. Sometimes people say the Jews gave 10% of the law. It's not true. There are certain things of which they gave 10%, but they gave far more. And if you add up everything they brought, the offerings and all they were to bring, they gave more like 33 1/3%. And I've heard people say in teaching giving, well, if the Jews gave 10%, we ought to at least do more than that. Well, that's the wrong comparison. They gave 33 1/3%. So if you're going to outgive the Jew, you're going to have to move it up from 10%. And this continual bringing of offerings, I don't think we can fathom. I don't think I fathom how many offerings the priest dealt with every day. And then you had your yearly sacrifices, like the Day of Atonement, and you had when everybody came, like the 3 annual feasts. And you had a lot of blood being shed. You had a lot of bread being offered and grain. Pentecost offering the first fruits, just continual offering. So that's a good point. Thank you for raising that. They were coming with these offerings. Other questions or comments?
Yes, as far as verse 34:29, it says that if there's any of the flesh or bread remains till the morning,
Yes,
then it shall be burned with fire and not be eaten.
yes.
Okay, in Leviticus 7:18, it says, if any of the flesh of the sacrifice of peace offerings be eaten at all on the 3rd day. What would that be something different? In the
Yes,
law?
this is the flesh of the ram that is brought. And then in Leviticus 7, we're dealing with the peace offerings only.
Okay.
So you're dealing with more than, see, verse 31 of Exodus 29, you shall take the ram of the consecration. So there's your consecration offering. And then you also have the peace offerings. And let's just go to Leviticus 7, begin verse 11, the law of the sacrifice of peace offerings. And we'll see there's more involved in the peace offering. Verse 12, if he offers it for a thanksgiving, then he shall offer with the sacrifice of thanksgiving unleavened cakes mixed with oil, unleavened wafers anointed with oil, or cakes of blended flour mixed with oil. Besides the cakes, as his offering, he shall offer leavened bread with the sacrifice of thanksgiving of his peace offering. And from it he shall offer 1 cake from each offering as a heave offering to Jehovah. It shall belong to the priest who sprinkles the blood of the peace offering. The flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering for thanksgiving shall be eaten the same day it is offered. He shall not leave any of it until the morning. But if the sacrifice of his offering is a vow or a voluntary offering, it shall be eaten the same day that he offers his sacrifice, but on the next day the remainder of it also may be eaten. The remainder of the flesh of the sacrifice on the third day must be burned with fire. So here you're dealing with a vow or a voluntary offering. Like over here you're dealing with the consecration offering. Good question. Anyone else? So we have Aaron and his sons now have been clothed and put on these special garments. Now in chapter 29, 35 to 37, Aaron and his sons are confined. Thus you shall do to Aaron and his sons according to all that I've commanded you. 7 days you shall consecrate them. And you shall offer a bull every day as a sin offering for atonement. You shall cleanse the altar when you make atonement for it, and you shall anoint it and sanctify it. 7 days you shall make atonement for the altar and sanctify it, and the altar shall be most holy. Whoever touches the altar must be holy. All right, go to Leviticus 8. Verse 33. And you shall not go outside the door of the tabernacle of meeting 7 days, until the days of your consecration are ended. For 7 days he shall consecrate you. So over here, we're looking at the offerings that are made during those 7 days. As he has done this day, so Jehovah is commanded to do, to make atonement for you. Therefore you shall stay at the door of the tabernacle of meeting day and night for 7 days, and keep the charge of Jehovah, so that you may not die. For so Moses says, I have been commanded. So you offering these offerings, and don't you leave the door of the tent of meeting. 7 days these priests are to remain there. So notice, 7 days. And this is the authority behind the consecration. Don't go out from the door of the tent of meeting until these days are consecrated. If you do, you're going to die. Now, we're kinfolk, some of these people, aren't we? Don't you just know if it had been some of us, somebody that died, because they just thought of something they just had to do outside the tabernacle, the door of the tabernacle. And God's not playing with this. If you're going to be consecrated, you do what I tell you to do. Notice 7, most people call it the number of perfection among the Hebrews. So you have this setting them apart, consecrated, 7 days. And every day they repeated these ceremonies. They'd go through this offering. And every day the bullock of the sin offering for atonement is to be offered. So you have 7 offerings. Every day you're going through this same routine in consecrating these priests. Notice also you deal with the altar itself. The altar is to be cleansed, atoned for, anointed, and sanctified each day for the 7-day period. So you offer everything on it, you clean it, you anoint it, you sanctify it. The altar is to be most holy. Literally, instead of most holy, its literal reading is holiness of holiness. And everything that touched the altar was holy. Now, this is an imperative. This is a command. And it states that nothing which is not holy is not to be allowed to touch that altar. Nothing. Everything has to be holy that touches it. So this may be a way of saying everything you bring to this altar has to meet God's specifications. You can't just bring whatever you want to bring. You must do what God said. And the reason, Jehovah commanded it to be done. Now, if these things followed the erection of the tabernacle that we read about in Exodus 40, well, let's just take the time. I stopped a little early for break, so let's take the time to go to Exodus 40, verses 1 and 2. I think I gave you one on your outline. Then Jehovah spoke to Moses, saying, on the first day of the first month, you shall set up the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. All right? What is the first month? Abib. So if this is started with the setting up of the tabernacle, the dates for this consecration would be Abib 1 through 7. You're dealing with your first month. When the tabernacle is set up, then you consecrate these priests for the next 7 days. And so doing that, then Jehovah begins to use the tabernacle from which to speak to the people. Do you have questions or comments on what we have tried to cover tonight? No, we're plowing new ground. This is new. What I want to impress you with is God's specifications. God said do it this way. That's the way we have to do it.
How was it determined, and they're given like, if it was 33%, what their worth was? How did they determine that?
It wasn't brought according to word. It was brought according to what the sacrifice was. So if you had a certain sacrifice, you'd offer a ram, or another sacrifice that might be a he-goat, or another sacrifice that might be 2 turtle doves and a young pigeon.
So it didn't include everything in the offering?
It wasn't like our giving is according to the custom. It was according to what was specified. That's a good question. Now, next Tuesday, if you know anything about weather,